Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. Today, we're going to be speaking with the creators of the musical Billy and the Dreamers, a new Canadian show. And I'm excited to talk to these guys about anything Canadian, musical-wise. It's fantastic. So let's jump right in. I'd like to welcome Grace Kosaka and Neil Coombs to the show. Grace, Neil, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this.
And thanks for your support of new musicals.
No problem. No problem. Hey, if I can get the word out there about a show, just to hear one more person hear it, you never know who that person is, right? So.
That's right.
Awesome. So I'm going to start, as I do with every interview, with a 30-second bio. And Grace, we're going to start with you. Who is Grace in 30 seconds?
Hi, my name is Grace Kosaka. I was born in Montreal. I grew up in Toronto. And as you can imagine, I'm Japanese Canadian. So I was pressured to pursue an acceptable profession. But in spite of that, I was really drawn to the arts. And I particularly like dance and music. So when Neil and I met, we had this common passion, and that's what led us to collaborate on film, and now our very first musical, Billy and the Dreamers.
Fantastic. All right. And Neil, tell us, who are you in 30 seconds?
Hi. Well, I grew up in Australia of English parents, and after having been there for more than a decade, our family experienced a sort of life-changing event that forced us to leave the country. And so I was like 12 or 13. So all I'd really known was sunshine and surfing, and we were forced to return to this like cold, damp place that I had no connection with whatsoever. So, I found my happiness and my escape in sport, art, and science, actually, and that's something that continues to this day. So our new musical, Billy and the Dreamers, is based on some of these events and my life as a teenager in England. And those experiences form the basis for Billy and the Dreamers.
Nice. And so were both of you into musical theater growing up, or is that something you discovered later? Grace, let's start with you.
For me, I guess the answer is yes. I first remember I was 5. I was in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then later in high school, I was in Oliver in Oklahoma.
All right. And Neil?
No, I don't. Not at least not initially. Mm-hmm. My grandfather and great grandfather were both in the Royal Marines, and also an uncle was in the Royal Marines band, and so these guys, there was music around from that tradition, and my mom was a huge rock fan, loved the Rolling Stones, Creedence Clearwater Revival, so there was always music around. I think I first fell in love with theater when I heard the soundtrack for Jesus Christ Superstar, and it just blew my mind. I thought this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. And then subsequently, I guess Lionel Bart's Oliver is also a big influence. But yeah, this is something that grew over time.
All right, so we've got somebody in Montreal. We got somebody in England. How do the two of you meet? Let's hear that.
Actually, we met at university, and then we struck up a conversation because I had studied dance when I was a kid, and I also studied piano, and I had left it when I went to university. And so we got into a conversation about art, and I said, after university, I'd like to study dance again, but I'm apprehensive, and Neil was like a real champion. He's like, you can do it. You just work hard. You can do it. Don't let your own your self-doubt limit you. So if you love it, just go for it.
And what university was this?
University of Toronto.
Oh, you're at UT. Oh, okay. Nice. So Montreal, England came to Toronto.
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And Neil, what were you studying there?
Well, actually, I was. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory there. My first paying gig was actually as a fine artist, and this is when I was. This is when I was in England, in a seaside town called Portsmouth, and they had this old sort of Napoleonic defense wall there with these huge stone arches. And on the weekends, artists would go and sell their wares. And, I looked at this. It was a beautiful spot. And I remember going there, walking around and going, I could do this. So I did. So I was, I think, 15 or 16 when I started to paint. And I would take my stuff down there every Sunday. And I did pretty well, actually. I did fairly well. So that was my first paint gig. And then, it's funny. I was thinking then, obviously, extending my interest in the arts. But my granddad, whom I was very close with, he was terminally ill and we lost him to cancer. And it was essentially, look, I can do art anytime, but if I'm going to make some sort of contribution to the sciences and, try to do something about this horrible disease, I have to go to school now. Yeah. So I went to Imperial College in London, which is, if for people in North America don't know it as well, probably, it's the equivalent of MIT. Mm. And so, yeah, I pursued the sciences there with a view to doing cancer research ultimately, which is what I did. Now, the other great thing about London, of course, though, is that this is in the early 80s, and what a place to be. I mean, I remember going to see XTC, Joe Jackson, Blondie for like £5, So this is a huge influence and a wonderful place to spend your education in. And one little story I think is nice to share, because the culture was so thick in London at that point. I remember being in a sort of after hours club on the King's Road in London, which is sort of famous for being hip. And at the very next table, there was Boy George singing, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, to his friend.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, I'm in the right place at the right time,
That's incredible. So then how did you make it over the pond to the U of T then?
Well, that's interesting, actually, because after I finished at Imperial, I was offered a scholarship to Cambridge. This is going to sound like an absolute madman. I didn't take it.
Wow.
And the reason I didn't, I wanted to go somewhere new, somewhere where people were thinking outside the box. And at that point, sort of English mindset for me was really just, it didn't suit me.
Yeah.
And I was still an outsider. I mean, I was, for all intents and purposes, this Australian boy who felt very much like a tropical fish out of water, if you like. Mm-hmm. And so coming to the University of Toronto, there was some really good research happening here. That's what drew me. So.
Great. Yeah. Well, come to Canada, all the Australians, because we're both children of England, right?
Yeah, indeed we are.
Exactly.
So you met at U of T. What inspired you to start working together on a musical? Is Billy and the Dreamers the first thing you worked on together, or was that after you learned about each other and worked together?
Well, actually, I started to study dance, and then what I enjoyed about it was the storytelling aspect. And I realized that, for instance, I went to this concert, I think it was Paula Abdul or something. And she had these fantastic dancers, like 5 dancers behind her. And she said, these are my fantastic dancers. And she said, these are 5 out of the 3,000 that auditioned. And it was like, will I remember any single one of them or their contribution to art? No, I won't. And so Neil and I discussed it, and he said, actually, when he was a kid, he left out some of his credits. He would make films on Super 8. And so he would do that. And I had a fear of acting. And again, Neil said, no, I think you can do it. And so then we decided to collaborate on film. So what we did is we started by writing together. And then we realized, okay, 40,000 screenplays at this time are registered each year to the Writers Guild. And then 4,000, so from 40,000 to 4,000 are made into feature films. So maybe we should just jump off the deep end and make a feature film. Yeah. And so we decided to do that. And I switched from dancing to acting, and we co-wrote the scripts. So we wrote about 10 scripts together, and we made 4 feature films. So the biggest budget is a film we did with Tom Sizemore, Ving Rhames, Saul Rubinek and Canadian Cynthia Dale,
Yeah.
she's known for her commitment to live theater. And so actually it's interesting because Neil's style, the very first film we made, we decided we're going to make a feature film in one single day. And so we planned it all out, we rehearsed it, and then Neil had 5 cameras running, and that way he would use a longer lens so that the cameras were not really intrusive. So it allowed all of us to kind of live in the environment and do each full scene instead of, at that time, people would use, 2 cameras, do the close-ups, then reset, do the wide, and you'd lose the natural feeling of it. So his style was actually filmed theater.
Yeah.
So so then after that last film, there was also an aspect in film that the writer is not respected. So basically, I produced and I raised the money because I wanted to protect the art. So, and also I did not apply for public funding because I went to some courses on it, some seminars, and they basically said commercial films were kind of shunned. So it was a strange combination. We cast with diversity, but we want the widest audience. So I just raised the money myself. But in terms of film writers, if you get a producer on board, they can put any number of writers onto your script. And for the writer coming on board, it's in their best interest to rewrite 12% or more of your screenplay, because then they get their name on the copyright. So the writing gets diluted. And then after that, the director generally does not get final cut of the movie. And then after that, they would call me, "Oh, you're a creative producer," as if this was a dirty, a bad thing. And so it was a very odd environment. So we decided, and Neil's keep trying to achieve filmed theater. So why don't
we just do theater?
Do theater.
So no, that's right. And I think that there's a couple of things about this, having written and directed, and worked with some fairly big talent. I had a big team of 60 people on the movie with Tom Sizemore and Ving Rhames, and it's a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of fun. But in the end of the day, you lose control of it, because the distributors they control the money, basically. And so, in the end of the day, they'll say, well, if you want this thing to go into Italy and France as sort of markets, then you got to cut 20 minutes out of this thing. So that really didn't sit well with me. So I thought, Grace is exactly right. Why don't we actually do what I was probably already planning to do from the beginning?
Nice. And so you've worked together. You've got all these. Who came up with the idea for Billy and the Dreamers? Let's take it to there. Obviously, it's more about what Neil's experience in England, but who said, let's do this?
Neil. He jumped in with the story, and again, the idea that yes, we can do this. Neil played guitar, he wrote songs, he's made films, we've written together, I've danced, I studied piano, a little bit of violin, but not very much. But so he said, you know what, why don't we just jump in and do it?
And I think the other thing too, I've always been a theater fan, and I don't know if I should really say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of the biggest disappointments I've had is going to a show that to me had so much promise, only to find that there's 2 songs out of the entire list that are any good. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of stuff that's either exposition or it's transitional, and none of that works for me. I mean, I have to say, in all honesty, that I've left a couple of shows halfway through. And I've had to have a stiff drink at another one halfway through just to keep going. So what we were thinking of was like, okay, let's maybe just sort of change this paradigm a little bit and say, okay, why don't we try to make every one of them a song that people can connect with, that they could hum along to, sing, that's going to mean something. So that was sort of the underlying mandate that we had. So that, people spend really a lot of money to go to the theater, and particularly in New York, it's crazy, right? So if you're going to do this, they deserve to get the best show possible. Absolutely. And so that means crafting all the songs as carefully as possible, right? So to do that within the framework of storytelling is, it's challenging, but it was a good challenge. It was fun to do. So yeah, the story basically is, elements of my life. But the one thing I have to credit Grace for enormously is that I think as I was, there's pain in everybody's life, but there was pain in my life in certain areas. So I kind of made it more generic. So instead of the town of Portsmouth, where a lot of this takes place, I just picked Watford, which is this anonymous town north of London, just so that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Right. And to Grace's credit, she said, come on, man, you've got to do this. The truer it is, the better it'll be.
Well, I had seen everybody's talking about Jamie at the Apollo in London, and some of the jokes I didn't get and the audience roared, but it was so real because it was about someone who grew up in Sheffield. And that's when it actually took me maybe 2 months to say to Neil, could you make it Portsmouth, because it's so real and Watford's not real. And I knew that would be painful to go through the memories again. And then he said yes, and it just came alive because I could also see the places that he described. Like we put it in the stories that he's told me about, as kids scaling the wall at the Royal Marines barracks to play in the yard where they,
I'm in trouble with the Marines.
Oops, sorry.
Well, now Neil's been arrested since.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oops.
Retrospectively arrested.
Yes. So we put that in, except in the story they get caught. So, but Neil never did. But so they just used to play in the yard, and then also the aspect of the sea, that is a big part of the story, is that it is the home of the Royal Marines, and they launched the D-Day landings from there in the Second World War. And then in the 80s, with Margaret Thatcher in power, she basically cut taxes for the rich and then cut benefits for the poor, and it was kind of a bit forgotten versus how proud and how supported that city should have been given its impact.
So you've got the show written now. You've gone through it. You've changed the location of it. You've got the show written. What happened next? What's in the production history of Billy and the Dreamers so far?
Well, it was 2019. We did our first workshop here in Toronto. We did a 1-week workshop so that we could basically read through the script, and then we made changes. We made changes to the characters, and then July 2019 we had our second 1-week workshop. Actually, we did a 10-day workshop, I think, and we again went through the script, the characters. We edited a lot of songs, and we started blocking actually a little bit so that we could have the view of what would come in from stage right, stage left, and what the characters would be doing. It was very, very, very helpful. And then November 2019.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't mean to do that.
No, go ahead.
One of the things about the workshops that was really fun for us, because I have a sort of a background in film, is that we actually shot quite a bit of the rehearsals. I mean, not for it ever to be seen or distributed, but simply on green screen, so that I could then mock up sets behind it, right? So this was a really fun thing to do to help us pre-visualize, what was going on. And then
so that gives us a great idea of how certain things will work. So that was very good because we're both very visual as well. So we like to see the image in our head, and then we had a chance to perform 2 brief scenes and a live song performance at the gala for Canada's Top 100 Employers at the end of November in 2019. And we were a surprise. So the audience wasn't expecting us. And we had a live performance of our finale song, Dream Out Loud. And the audience loved it. There were about 500 CEOs and top business people. And that was wonderful. Then in March of 2020, Cody Lassen joined our team. So he's the executive producer, and he is from New York. He has a Tony Award, and he's been very instructive to help guide us through the process of how to take it from here, what steps. Then we went through, we have a general manager, a very good one. We set up our corporation in the US, and we're starting to approach investors now. But also, most importantly, he connected us with an excellent dramaturg and from New York. And so we spent, I would say, between May and December working with him. So, and now we're happy with the script. So now we're starting to approach theaters for the out of town tryout.
Congratulations on all of that stuff.
Thank you.
Gained all that. Now I have to ask, because that's been a main topic of a lot of the interviews over the last 6 months to a year. March happened, you found all this stuff, and then COVID hit. How is that? Has it been a hindrance, or has it been a bit of a surprise help because now you have all this free time?
Well, fortunately we were in a position to have really dedicated ourselves for the last couple of years to the process. So the time aspect was not helpful. I should also mention that I had a moderate case of COVID myself.
Oh no.
Which I still get. I still get sort of flashbacks of it every now and again, but it was really debilitating. Now, I was not hospitalized or anything, but I've never been so exhausted in my life, and that lasted a good 3 months. Wow. So in that sense, no. I mean, so did it help? No, it didn't. But the other thing too, though, is that the structure of how we work. Grace has a small setup at her place, and I have something closer to a studio at mine, and there's our bubble anyway, right? So in a sense, we're just going back and forth between these 2 locations anyway. So no, it wasn't in that sense much of a burden. I mean, the only real concern is the concern everybody else has about what does this do to the timeline of your show?
Yes.
And that still remains to be seen.
Well, I think for me, it was great because in one way, because we have more time to just put our heads down and work with the dramaturg for that extended period. But it's unfortunate because it's best for me to pitch people for money or theaters in person. But other than that, it's in terms of the art, it's been great. I just wish that we were able to meet people in person.
Oh, by the way, I'd like to just mention something about this whole dramaturge idea. I mean, I think for a lot of writers, this is something that they would almost instinctively balk at. I wouldn't blame them, because the idea of having somebody tinker with your stuff is a bit, bit daunting, and not something that you necessarily want to do. What I have to say, that the individual we worked with was absolutely fabulous, and their insights just allowed us to tighten it and make it richer. And so I would highly recommend all writers, if you can get hold of a good one, stick with them, because it's like having a great book editor. It just tightens everything up, and it's really invaluable.
Yeah, but that having been said, it's we were lucky because Cody Lassen, had experience. So he gave us a list of 3 that he uses already. So we were lucky to have that kind of reading down process, but it's been critical. And this person's approach was very methodical and logical. And it's not prescriptive. It's not like, I think you should change that scene and do this. No, he's just pointing out the structure. So here's the general structure. Whether you want to follow it or reject it is up to you, but I'm just pointing out where it's going. So that was really helpful.
It's always good to have another pair of eyes that have no, for lack of a term, investment in it, right? They
exactly
want it to be the best it can be. They're they've nothing invested into it. But sometimes it must be difficult, like you said, to have someone go, oh, this I don't agree with. Did you ever, I'm curious, did you ever have a moment where you disagreed and either you came around or they came around?
I would actually, in my case, I'd say absolutely no. Oh. Now, the thing is, though, we did approach 3, as was suggested by Cody. So we approached 3 folks, and 2 of them, you could already feel there was this closet writer in them. There's a sense that they wanted to sort of take over and tell you how it is a little bit. But with the one we chose, he used such an analytical structure for his analysis of scenes, and then the overall scope of the first act, second act, the timing, the placement of songs. So very technical, but still, I mean, very insightful at the same time.
Actually, Neil just brought up a good point. We had a conversation with all 3 first before we decided who we wanted to work with. And that's very important.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's like math. You can't argue with it, right? And analytical is nothing. It's black and white, and it's, no emotion attached. So that's great. So what do you see for the future of Billy and the Dreamers? Moving forward, once the pandemic clears up, what do you see?
I see a workshop and a run at a regional theater in the US, and because we'd love to work with the artistic director, the producing directors, and just see it on its feet, because it's changed a lot. The story has a lot of scenes have changed, and also we've added more in a way that, again, this is what's helpful about the dramaturg, things that Neil and I know so well about the backstory of each of the characters, where they come from and all of that, and their interactions. We've put that on the page to make sure everyone can see it. And now we're dying to see it on its feet in a regional theater, and then ultimately Broadway, and the West End would be lovely as well.
Well, it's a funny thing. So the story is essentially about this, this group of individuals who they're all misfits in many ways. So I'll just give you like a little bit of a background. So there's the character of Billy, who's the exile from Australia, and he's the singer-songwriter guy. And then the other band members, there's an individual called Sarah, and so these are loosely based on people I actually knew. And Sarah was sort of exiled to Portsmouth because her father had upset somebody at Oxford as a professor. And so he ended up at Portsmouth Polytechnic. So like, this is the back of beyond, right? And so this very artistic and clever girl is like, what the hell am I doing here? And then the other 2, one's a South Asian guy who is actually, though, with a Trinidadian accent. So his life path had been from, India to Africa, Kenya, and then ultimately Trinidad, and then England. So he's, traveled all over. And this character is a really thoughtful young gay man in a town where being gay is a really bad idea. And then the last of the band members is a guy called Ronnie, who's a big, burly black guy from the East End of London, who, much like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, except under much lower budget, has been sent to his uncle in Portsmouth to stay out of trouble. So these are the sort of guys, and they're very much outsiders, but what's common about them really does bring them together. And I think it's just a story about friendship and family. And then, so what they're doing, the music that they play is the thing that kind of binds them together. There's a Battle of the Bands contest. They win it. They go to London. They go play at the Marquee, the famous, fabulous Marquee. And they win a 6-month tour of the US. But on the eve of leaving, Billy's father dies. And his mom, Billy cannot abandon his mom. There's absolutely no way. And so he convinces his 3 friends that they've got it. They can cover the singing, the playing, everything. So they go and he stays behind. And so that's really where the thrust and the tension of the story is. And so it's how that plays out, resolves, that I think it's really engaging. And it does, it's got its ups and downs. It's sad here and there, but ultimately it's a really uplifting story. Yeah. And I think that to get back to that, see if I can circle back to the question. The thing about what Grace was saying was that, we know so much of this story ourselves that the dramaturge helps you pull out stuff that, like, for example, the Marquee. Most Americans don't know what it is, but it's the same as CBGBs, although younger Americans probably don't know what that is either.
It's true.
Or the troubadour, whatever. But so we had to like pad it with explanation, but in a good way. Like, it's great, but you want to make sure the readers are getting this, right?
And also one of the ideas too is that being Canadian, we don't feel the same weight of the class structure as in the UK. So it also touches on socioeconomic diversity. So the fact is that Ronnie's Black, Trevor's South Asian and gay, Sarah can be any ethnicity, and Billy is thrown in there from Australia, and all of them are friends, family. They love each other, and they're all close. They'll always be there for each other. But in the story, Billy dates this girl, Eva, who is upper class. And although it's fine because Billy has an Australian accent, so he's kind of a foreigner and he's exempt. But once she meets Billy's parents, she breaks up with him because they have the working class British accent. And they've been dating for a year. Everything's fine. The instant that she hears that working class accent, she's out. And so that in the UK, that kind of financial divide in the class structure is really a big barrier. And
it's still present. And so anyway, I guess the reason that I want to get back to what the reason was for why New York is so important, because this thing is going to resonate in the US and in the UK, just by the nature of the story. Yeah. Because there's a connection there with the music scene and everything else. So, but again, I wouldn't mind having it in Broadway anyway. Regardless.
Yes, exactly.
Twist your arm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Grace, Neil, thank you so much for talking to us about the show and coming on and telling us a little bit more about it. I'm looking forward to seeing it finally on stage somewhere.
Thank you.
And as long as it's around, I'll keep promoting it and try and getting more people to learn about Billy and the Dreamers.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Now, before we go, though, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. Now, there's no right or wrong answer, though the last one I will judge you on.
All right.
So, question number 1 is what creator or team within musical theater has had a great influence on you? Now, it could be a composer, a lyricist, director, producer, actor, stage manager, even. It could be famous, non-famous, like a teacher. Is there anybody in the music theater world that's had an influence on you? Let's start with you, Grace.
I would say Lionel Bart, because I love the energy of Oliver, and I love the music you can sing along to. And I do enjoy the kind of verse chorus structure of the songs. And also it's a good test when like 5, 6, 7-year-olds sing your song, then you're doing great. No, I'm just kidding.
That's good.
And Neil?
Oh, this is going to sound a bit dull, I guess, but it's Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim for West Side Story.
Yep.
That is it's such a masterpiece. And again, an example of a collaboration between great music and great lyrics. And yeah, that's the one that really impressed me and has always stuck with me.
Can't go wrong with either of those answers. So correct, 1 point each. So question number 2. Now, which do you find harder? Which industry do you find harder, film or live theater? Grace?
That's a really good question, because we haven't got out to onto stage yet. But I would have to say, though, in my interactions in theater, everyone has been so nice and supportive and helpful. And NAMT, the National Alliance of Musical Theater, they've been wonderful. And people give advice, and it's really a wonderful feeling. It's a contrast to film.
Neil?
Yeah, I would agree with that, but for maybe slightly different reasons. I kind of think, having been in film and having seen my work chopped up by other people, theater is the last refuge for the author. It really is. And that's a wonderful thing. And I would also have to agree with Grace completely. The people we've met, I've had to sort of, slap my face to, okay, are these people real? Because, even folks who can't immediately help, we've had artistic directors and producers still write a full page email of advice on what to do here and what to do there. In the film industry, trust me, it never happens. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and yourself included in those very nice people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's weird to fear, film and theater, they're both arts and they're both doing technically the same thing, telling stories, etc. But I don't understand how the people within the industries could be so different and not want to help. It boggles my mind.
Well, I think you don't go into theater with the desire to be rich and famous.
That's very true.
Well, you know what though? There was when James Corden was hosting the Tonys a few years back, he had a bunch of performers in his car doing carpool karaoke or whatever it was. And he had one question for them. He said, which do you prefer, theater or money? So what I'm saying is that, so it's not top loaded with greed. It just isn't. And I think the art's the thing. I mean, I think that's the big difference.
All right. Question number 2, correct answers. Very good. So question number 3, this is the one. Which is worse, food in the theater or cell phones in the theater?
For me, cell phones. I don't mind food as long as it's not noisy, but cell phones are really frustrating.
And Neil?
Oh, well, absolutely no question. I mean, the phones are just ridiculous. Anyone who's that disrespectful to other people just blows my mind. So yeah, they're out. But I prefer the English way, where people take champagne into the theater and drink a lot, but they don't eat anything.
Which I hear you can get you through some bad shows.
Yes, it can indeed.
Well, I would have also accepted both are terrible. So, but you are correct. So 3 for 3 for both of you. Very good.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, again, Neil, Grace, congratulations on the show, taking it wherever it goes. And we will follow your journey and support you as much as we can. And thank you again for coming on and telling us about the show as well.
Thank you so much for this. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
No problem. All right, that was Grace and Neil, the creators of the musical Billy and the Dreamers. Tune in next week as we'll have another guest or guests who talk about their life, love, and passion. That is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov, and I will see you when I see you.